The wind howled through the mountain pines just after dusk. First a low whistle, then a roar that chilled the very marrow of 11-year-old Leo Harper's bones. He stood on the edge of the gravel driveway, his knuckles white as he gripped the straps of his worn backpack. Beside him, Snowie, his majestic golden retriever, pressed her warm flank against his leg, her ears pinned back as she sensed the shifting air. Behind them, the heavy oak door, the only home Leo had ever known, didn't just close. It slammed with finality that echoed off the peaks. "I'm done with your father's ghost, and I'm done with you," Lila Kane's voice shrieked from behind the glass, sharp as a blade and twice as cold. Leo didn't cry. He had learned that Lila fed on tears. He simply watched as his father's old hiking boots were tossed from the upstairs window, landing in the dirt like fallen soldiers. Welcome to Mr. Bryan's Tale, where every story takes you on an unforgettable journey. Whether it's thrilling adventures, heartwarming moments, or tales that'll keep you on the edge of your seat, this is your destination for captivating storytelling. If you love getting lost in exciting narratives and discovering new worlds with every video, you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss out on the next amazing tale. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Lila twisted the deadbolt, the metallic click sounding like a gunshot in the quiet mountain air. Leo swallowed the lump in his throat, a hollow ache spreading through his chest. He looked down at Snowie, who licked his hand with steady, grounding heat. They had been a team since Leo was 5, ever since his father, Mr. Harper, had brought the pup home in a cardboard box. Snowie was more than a pet. She was the last living piece of his father's heart. "We can't stay here, girl," Leo whispered, his voice trembling but his resolve hardening. No porch lights flickered on in the neighboring distance. No one came to ask if a boy and his dog were safe. With one last look at the darkened windows, Leo turned his back on the life he knew and stepped into the vast, indifferent wilderness. The mountain trek was brutal. If the sky wasn't trying to freeze them, the thick underbrush was trying to trip them. By the time they reached the forgotten trail, leading toward the valley, Leo's sneakers were soaked and his fingers were numb. Every creaking branch sounded like a warning, but Snowie stayed close, her protective eyes scanning the shadows. Just as Leo's legs threatened to give out, Snowie stopped. She let out a low, urgent whine, her nose twitching toward a dark-shaped huddle between two leaning pines. As they approached, the structure took form, an old, dilapidated cabin. The roof sagged and the porch steps were rotted, but was dry. The locals called it cursed, a place where the mountain kept its secrets, but to a boy with nowhere else to go, it looked like a miracle. Leo pushed the door open, it groaned a long, dusty welcome, inviting them into the dark heart of a mystery that would change their lives forever. The wind howled through the jagged mountain pass just after dusk, a thin chill that quickly grew heavy enough to soak through Leo's light hoodie. 11-year-old Leo Harper stood on the edge of the gravel driveway, his knuckles white as he gripped the frayed straps of his backpack, while Snowie, his majestic golden retriever, pressed close to his leg. Behind them, the front door of the only home Leo had ever known slammed with finality that shook the porch. "I'm done taking care of another woman's mistake," Lila Kane snapped from inside, her voice sharp and unforgiving. Leo didn't answer. He had learned that arguing only fed her bitterness. Lila didn't bother to look back as she tossed a pair of his old sneakers onto the dirt, where one hit the railing and tumbled into a muddy puddle. To her, Leo wasn't a grieving child. He was a burden, a reminder of a life she wanted to forget after Mr. Harper passed away. With a decisive twist of the deadbolt, the metallic click signaled his exile. Leo swallowed hard, his chest tight with a mix of shock and shame, but he remained hollow rather than angry. Snowie let out a low, protective whine, licking Leo's cold hand to remind him he wasn't alone. They had been through everything together, empty dinners and lonely nights, and the dog was now his only family. "We can't stay here," Leo whispered, his voice steady despite his shaking hands. Turning away from the glowing porch lights of a neighborhood that remained silent, the small boy and his loyal dog disappeared into the dark, carrying nothing but each other and a fragile hope toward the looming mountain peaks. The gravel of the driveway gave way to the soft, damp needle carpet of the forest floor as Leo and Snowie stepped into the shadow of the towering pines. The rain kept falling, a cold and heavy weight that seemed determined to wash them right off the map. Every step felt heavier than the last, the darkness swallowing the road behind them, until the only world that existed was a narrow circle of trees illuminated by the fading twilight. Snowie stayed close, her alert and protective eyes scanning the dark thicket on either side. Every so often, she glanced back at Leo as if to say he wasn't alone, her presence the only thing keeping the crushing silence of the woods at bay. As they trekked deeper, the wind groaned to the high branches, sounding eerily like the cold echoes of Lila's voice. To drown it out, Leo reached for the memory of his father, Mr. Harper. He could almost hear the low, steady rumble of his dad's voice during their old camping trips. Being poor doesn't make you weak. His father used to say, being dishonest does. True strength wasn't about the house you owned or the money in your pocket. It was about the person you remained when everything else was stripped away. Leo gripped the straps of his backpack, a fragile hope flickering in his chest despite the numbing cold. He didn't know where they were going, only that he had to carry his father's lessons into the dark. The forest was not peaceful, but as Leo looked at the loyal dog by his side, he knew they would survive as long as they had each other. Just when Leo thought his legs would give out beneath the weight of the rain and the cold, Snowie stopped. The dog pulled gently on her leash, her ears pitched forward and her nose twitching as she peered through the thick fog. Ahead, tucked between a cluster of leaning, ancient pines, a dark shape took form, a cabin. It looked old and forgotten, as if the world had quietly walked away from it decades ago. The roof sagged heavily in the middle, and one of the windows was boarded up with crooked, weathered planks that looked like jagged teeth. Vines crawled up the rotting log walls, and the porch steps were cracked and overtaken by moss. Despite its broken appearance, the structure was still standing. Leo felt a strange flicker of hope ignite in his chest. He remembered the hushed whispers of the grown-ups in town. They called this place Bad Luck, and claimed it was haunted by the ghosts of the mountain. They said someone had once died here, and since then, no one dared to even look at it. But to a boy with nowhere else to go and a dog shivering by his side, the cabin didn't look haunted. It looked like a sanctuary. He pushed the door open with a trembling, careful hand. It groaned long and loud, though it protesting against the movement, but it didn't fall apart. Inside, the air was dusty and bitingly cold, but it was dry, and for the first time since the door slammed at home, that was enough. Morning light slipped through the broken window, thin and pale, but it was enough to wake Leo from a fitful sleep on a torn couch. Reality rushed back as he looked at the cracked ceiling. Yet for the first time, he felt a tiny piece of his chest loosen because they were no longer standing in the rain. First, he needed to make the place safer, but Snowie suddenly froze, her ears pitching forward before she let out a low, warning growl. The dog walked slowly toward the back of the cabin, stopping near the stairs that led down to the damp, dark basement. Leo flicked on a weak flashlight and followed her down into the cold air that smelled of wet wood and forgotten things. Instead of exploring the corners, Snowie went straight to a specific stone slab near the back wall and began scratching at it with urgent, sharp barks. Leo reached out to stop her, fearing she might knock something down, but the sound of her paws thumping against the surface felt wrong. He tapped the slab with his knuckles, and instead of solid thud, it emitted a hollow, metallic ring that echoed through the small space. His heart began to race with a cautious curiosity as he realized this section of the floor had been sealed on purpose. Using a rusty tool he found nearby, Leo carefully chipped away at the edges, dust filling the air as the heavy slab began to shift. Behind it lay a narrow opening, a hidden signal that the cursed cabin held a secret far deeper than anyone in town had ever imagined. Leo stared at the narrow panel, his breath catching in his chest as he realized someone had hidden this room on purpose. With a final push, the wood gave way to reveal a small vault that was strangely clean compared to the rest of the damp basement. Snowie wagged her tail, barking softly as if proud of the discovery, while Leo stepped inside and flicked his flashlight over the contents. Stacked neatly along the walls were metal boxes and bundles of yellowed papers tied with twine, their labels marked with dates and names that felt heavy with history. Plus one, among the artifacts, Leo found a series of leather-bound journals. His hand shook as he opened the first one and recognized the steady, familiar handwriting of his father, Mr. Harper. These weren't just old notes. They were detailed records and legal documents that told a story of loss and injustice. As he turned the fragile pages, the truth became undeniable. The very land they stood on and the home Lila had claimed as her own had been a legacy intended for Leo. His father had been the rightful heir to the entire estate, and Lila's control over it had been built on a foundation of lies and theft. Leo didn't know much about the world, but he could tell this wasn't junk. This was proof. He felt 1,000 thoughts rush through his mind about money, food, and a life where no one could ever throw him out again. Looking into Snowie's trusting eyes, he realized that the cursed cabin hadn't been a place of bad luck. It was a key to his father's final gift and a life that had been stolen from him. Leo barely slept that night, the weight of the secret he carried feeling heavier than the mountain itself. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the stacked metal boxes and the leather-bound journals, their contents sitting in his chest like a restless weight. The cabin was freezing, and his stomach growled with an insistent, sharp hunger that made his lightheadedness feel like a physical burden. He reached into one of the boxes and pulled out a small, intricately carved artifact that shimmered even in the weak morning light. His hand shook as he held it. Even with his untrained eyes, he knew this single object could change everything. In the silence of the basement, Lila's cold, unforgiving voice echoed in his mind, calling him a mistake and a burden who deserved nothing. If he sold just this one piece, he could buy warm clothes, hot food, and perhaps a small apartment where no one would ever throw him out again. But as he gripped the artifact, a different voice replaced the sharp sting of Lila's words, the low, steady rumble of his father. Being poor doesn't make you weak, Mr. Harper had always told him. Being dishonest does. Leo looked at Snowie, whose trusting, gentle eyes watched him with a quiet loyalty that expected nothing but the truth. He realized that doing the right thing wouldn't make his life easier right now, but it would preserve the only thing he had left that Lila couldn't touch, his integrity. He wrapped the artifact back in his jacket, whispering to Snowie that they were going back to town, not to sell their future, but to reclaim it with honesty. The walk back into town felt longer than the night he had been cast out, the heavy silence of the mountain replaced by the sharp, judgmental stares of people who saw only a dirty, tired kid with a dog and a secret wrapped under his arm. Leo's boots were caked in mud, and his heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird as he reached the local station. He didn't stop until he was standing before Officer Ella Voss. She looked up from her desk, her expression shifting from professional curiosity to genuine concern as she took in Leo's disheveled state and the intense, protective stance of Snowie at his side. With trembling hands, Leo placed the leather-bound journals and a small, shimmering artifact on the counter. "I found these in the old cabin," he said, his voice small but gaining strength as he remembered his father's words. "They belong to my father, Mr. Harper. They prove what Lila Kane did." Officer Voss's eyes widened as she began to leaf through the yellow pages, her trained gaze quickly identifying the legal seals and the maps of the estate. She looked from the documents to the boy, realizing the magnitude of the truth he had just handed her, not just a treasure of historical value, but the evidence of a stolen life. Within the hour, the quiet authority of the law began to move, as Voss signaled for units to head toward the mountain. For the first time in his life, Leo was treated like he mattered, his honesty serving as a badge of trust that would finally strip away Lila's lies and restore the legacy he had been born to carry. The quiet of the police station was shattered as the heavy front doors swung open and Lila Kane swept inside, her face a carefully constructed mask of maternal panic. She didn't look at the mud on the floor or the exhausted boy sitting on the wooden bench. Her eyes were locked onto the metal boxes and leather journals laid out across the evidence table. "Oh, Leo, I was so worried when you ran off," she cried, her voice dripping with fake concern that made Snowie let out a low, vibrating growl. She reached out, her fingers twitching toward the artifacts, ready to claim the find as her own. "Thank goodness you've kept our family's property safe. I'll take these home now." But Officer Ella Voss stepped between Lila and the table, her expression as cold as the mountain rain Leo had escaped. "There's been a change in plans, Mrs. Kane," Voss said, her hand resting firmly on the largest of journals. Lila's smile twitched, her eyes narrowing as she demanded to know why she couldn't take what belonged to her. Voss didn't flinch. "These journals don't just list artifacts. They contain your original marriage certificate and several letters from the late Mr. Harper's real legal counsel. As Lila's face paled, Voss continued, "The records prove your marriage was never legally finalized. You used fraudulent documents to seize this estate." The room went silent. Lila looked at Leo, waiting for him to feel small, but for the first time, he stood tall with Snowie at his side. He didn't see a powerful woman anymore. He saw a thief whose lies had finally run out of room to hide. The finder's fee she had come to snatch was gone, replaced by the weight of justice that had been years in the making. The golden light of a late autumn afternoon bathed the mountain clearing, transforming the once dilapidated cabin into a beacon of warmth and safety. The sagging roof had been replaced with sturdy cedar, and the rotted porch was now a wide, welcoming expanse of polished wood. Leo stood by the new railing, no longer a boy looking for a place to hide, but the protector of a legacy that finally felt like his own. The government's finder's fee and the restoration of his father's estate had provided the means, but it was Leo's heart that had built the Harper Haven. Snowie sat regally at his side, her tail thumping rhythmically against the boards as she watched the forest trail. +4. A rustle in the underbrush caught their attention, and a small, trembling boy named Slade emerged from the shadows of pines. He looked exactly as Leo had months before, shoulders hunched under a thin jacket, eyes wide with a hollow fear of having nowhere left to go. Leo didn't wait for the boy to speak. He stepped down the stairs, extending a hand that was steady and warm. "You're safe here," Leo promised, his voice echoing the quiet strength his father had always championed. Snowie stepped forward with gentle wag, offering the same silent loyalty that had once been Leo's only comfort. As they led Slade toward the open door, Leo knew that some circles were meant to be closed. In this house, built on integrity and reclaimed from the ruins of the past, no one would ever be thrown out into the cold again. As the final embers of the fire glowed in the hearth of the Harper Haven, Leo realized that the mountain air no longer felt cold. The cursed cabin, once a place of whispers and shadows, had become a lighthouse for those lost in the storm. By choosing integrity over a quick fortune, Leo hadn't just reclaimed his father's legacy. He built a foundation of hope that no one, not even Lila Kane, could ever tear down. Standing on that porch with Snowie, he finally understood his father's greatest lesson. True wealth isn't what you keep for yourself, but the sanctuary you build for others.
If Leo's journey from abandonment to becoming a protector touched your heart, please let us know in the comments. What would you have done if you found a life-changing secret in that basement? Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Mr. Brian's Tale for more powerful stories of courage, kindness, and the quiet strength of doing the right thing when the world is watching.